In mid-October of 1964, kissing cousins Elizabeth and Philip paid a royal visit to a Catholic residential school for Aboriginal children in Kamloops, British Columbia, Canada. William Coombs was 12 years old at the time of the royal visit. "I was an inmate at the Kamloops school when we were visited," said Coombs. "I remember it was strange because they came by themselves, no big fanfare or nothing. But I recognized them, and the school principal told us it was the Queen, and we all got given new clothes and good food for the first time in months the day before she arrived. The day the Queen got to the school, I was part of a group of kids that went on a picnic with her and her husband and some of the priests. We went down to a meadow near Dead Man's Creek. I remember it was weird because we all had to bend down and kiss her foot, and she was wearing a white lace boot. After a while, I saw the Queen and her husband leave the picnic with 10 children from the school, and those kids never returned. They took away those 10 kids and nobody ever saw them again. We never heard anything more about them, and we never met them again even when we were older. They were all from around there, but they all vanished." The group that disappeared was 7 boys and 3 girls in age from 6 to 14 years old. They were all from the smart group in the class. 2 of the boys were brothers, and they were Métis from Quesnel. Their last name was Arnoux, or Arnold. I don't remember the others, just an occasional first name like Cecilia, and there was an Edward. What happened was also witnessed by my friend, George Adolph, who was 11 years old at the time and a student there too. But he's dead now. William Coombs, the sole survivor, was scheduled to appear as the star witness at the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State in London, England. But William Coombs never made it to the tribunal. He died of unknown causes shortly before he was scheduled to testify. Reverend Kevin Annett, a former minister of the United Church of Canada, believes that William Coombs was
where the church was selling off native land to big logging companies for kickbacks. And I wrote a letter about that to the church. I was fired without cause and eventually thrown out of the church without any due process at all. But that one thing led to another, and I began to work a lot more with the survivors after that, the eyewitnesses.
Totally out of bounds, and me and a friend witnessed the sisters or brothers taking look like little bodies under white wrappings or white cloth, and putting into the furnace. And the Queen came and visited for about 3 days, 2-3 days. I don't know how long it was. I think it was about 3 days actually, and a lot of children went missing there.
If making sense of it is impossible, Canadians are at least trying to do something about what happened at this former residential school for Indigenous children. Among the tributes across Canada, many symbolize the number 215, the estimated number of children whose remains have been discovered in unmarked graves, according to the Kamloops First Nation. Flags are being lowered, including at Ottawa's Peace Tower and at other government buildings. There are calls for a national day of mourning from those who consider these tributes only the beginning.
We're going to most likely be bringing them home, which means potentially unearthing them and going through and identifying them and then seeing which community they belong to. So that's going to be so hard and so horrendous.
I felt grief, and I felt a little bit angry as well, and I'm not an angry person by nature.
This First Nations chief suggests only after a long period of reflection has he managed to find anything positive.
These children's hurt is gone. Their pain is gone. They're at peace. This is now about what we do to remember this moment, but also how do we go forward from here?
There are other questions: how to fit the discovery into the already disgraceful history of residential schools and into the pursuit of reconciliation. How to help our own children understand it, especially Indigenous students who live with the repercussions generations later. As Canadians look for new ways and new symbols to honor the children and their families, the full magnitude of the horror is unknown. The Kamloops First Nation says preliminary findings should be completed by mid-June. It promises updates as they become available. Ross Lord, Global News.
I'm here with Erica, a former nurse at St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver, and we're talking about William Arnold Coombs, who died in February 2011, and you were part of the treatment of William. At the time, I guess you didn't know that he had been an eyewitness to the abduction of 10 children by Queen Elizabeth from a residential school in October 1964, and he had gone public and talked about that. He was on the verge of being invited over to England when he died. And so we want to talk a little bit about your experience with William.
No, I wasn't aware of that, but I knew there was something up when I arrived for these constant care shifts, which is basically one-on-one LPN to one patient, which is usually only done if there's like very specific needs with that person. I found out when I arrived that when the CNL came up, she told me that they are identity protected, so I knew that there was something up immediately. The name on the chart was Ernie Coombs, which kind of made me laugh because that's Mr. Dressup's name, but
it was also the name of his dead brother who died in a residential school.
Yeah, that's what you told me when I first spoke with you, and that's kind of very mean to have us call him that. Anyways, so I read the chart, and it said basically the diagnosis was undiagnosed bloodborne infection and ETOH, which is alcoholism. And I went in the room after seeing that he only had one med prescribed to him. That was furosemide or Lasix, which is a fluid shifting med, usually for edema. And I went in the room, and he had not eaten his dinner, and I asked him if he was hungry, and he said he had a stomach ache. And then I sort of tidied things up in the room, and I watched him get up to go to the bathroom, and his mobility was extremely unstable. I asked him if he was dizzy, and he didn't say anything then, but later on, when he called for me for help getting up from the bathroom, he said the room was spinning, so I knew he was having vertigo and extreme weakness. He couldn't even get up. It was at that time that I saw his skin pallor wasn't right. It was mottled and had raised bumps. Something you called hyperkeratosis. He wasn't coughing at all. His urine was dark and smelly, which indicates that there's some sort of toxin in his system.
Was there any
stressed kidneys?
Any indication? They claim his cause of death was disseminated tuberculosis. Was there any indication of tuberculosis when you saw him?
None whatsoever. Like I said, he wasn't coughing, and there was no fever, and his chest sounds were clear when I did the head to toe. Yeah, there was absolutely no sputum, evidence of sputum, anything spat on towels. Sometimes they'll hide it like that, and there was nothing like that. There was nothing in the charts of any previous nurses that had seen any blood in his sputum, which is what you cough up, and any evidence of crepitus in the lungs. That would be like blockage. That's part of the meningitis kind of balls that form and block up the lungs when someone has active TB. Did not have active TB. I did, when I was in the bathroom with him, that's when I saw a Band-Aid on his lower back, and this Band-Aid is exactly where you would have a plaster put on after an LP. And LP is a common test for TB.
LP is lumbar puncture?
Yeah. Be on that little, the skin scratch test, the Manitou test. He didn't have any marks from that either. That's the little 4 prongs. Both of these things are really identifiable. And that led me to go and look through like the full chart and see if there was any tests for TB or things like that that were called for, or even an order for the LP. I did, in that shift, ask the CNO about his undiagnosed bloodborne infection, why he wasn't on an IV, remarked that his blood pressure was low and that he was dizzy and that perhaps he should be, and why isn't there any broad spectrum antibiotics being given to him, given the undiagnosed bloodborne infection. He literally had nothing in him. He was obviously very sick feeling. He seemed pretty quiet and depressed, really.
And when he apparently had some toxic poison in his system, he wasn't in isolation of any kind, though.
Yeah, that was the other part. He was in what's called an isolation room. There's 2 or 3 of them at the end of every unit in St. Paul's, and they're pretty coveted rooms for. We usually like to spare them for people that are contagious infections, and there was absolutely no contagion protocols in place for myself or any of the other people that came in and or out of that room.
So a lot of anomalies.
Yeah, there was a lot of things that didn't make sense. I did a total of 4 shifts with him, and the CNL, she would hear me on my questions about why he doesn't have an IV, he's not drinking or eating well, and no antibiotics. She would hear me on it, and she'd tell me she'd get back to me, but she didn't, which was unusual for her. She was a long time experienced.
And then tell us about the meeting you were called into.
Yeah, the CNO came up to me and when I was charting at the end of the midway through the shift, not at the end of the shift. And by the end of the shift, I was to go to a meeting regarding Ernie, William, and she didn't tell me that much about it. I had assumed it was a family meeting. She did come and knock on the door to tell me when they were ready, and she brought me to a little office, and there was 3 chairs with 3 people sitting there, and none of them looked native, none were family. And I sat down. One woman in the room had a St. Paul's badge. The other 2 had no badges whatsoever. I had never seen them before. The 2 men were, middle-aged. One was a Caucasian with very graying hair and sort of gaunt, pale skin, as if he'd been under fluorescent lights way too long. And the other fellow was very northern native BC looking, very Asiatic eyes, big bushy eyebrows, thick, wavy, dark hair with graying on the temples. He stared at me intensely the whole meeting. They asked me very pointed questions that were also they didn't fit with a hospital care planning meeting.
Like what questions?
They asked me what he'd been saying. And I had been involved with patients that were under observation for non-consensual admission before, and I think I reacted from fear of... I didn't want to answer this question. I asked them why he didn't have an IV, why he wasn't on antibiotics. That was my response, and that's when the native-looking man just, what's his mental status? He barked out at me, and I didn't like the look of him. He actually kind of scared me. And I said, I don't know. Why don't you have a psych consult come in?
Why do you think he asked about his mental status?
Well, in Canada, you need 3 doctors to sign off on you to basically be non-consensually admitted to a psych unit or have all your rights taken away, have anything done to you medically.
Including have your life support terminated?
If that's what they did, you could do that. Usually that's reserved for people who don't have any family, but yes, they could do that.
Because in William's case, that's exactly what happened later at BGH. They pulled him off life support without anyone's permission.
Yeah. I don't know what to say about that. The whole thing made me feel like I'm didn't want to nurse anymore. It felt like we weren't doing our job for this man.
So based on what you saw, some of the other symptoms you saw on him, what do you think, what's your medical opinion about his cause of death?
In hindsight, hyperkeratosis, the dark urine. He had these lines on his nails. They weren't ridged. It looked like the moon of your nail bed went halfway up, and it was a slightly darker singular line right across. Those lines combined with the constant abdominal pains, the dizziness, and moments of almost delirium that I saw him have. He around the twilight hour, 6 to 7 o'clock, he would almost be talking about like memories as if they were currently happening in the room, and I let him go with it because he's talking to me.
The delirious. What does that all indicate?
And these lines, which are called Mees lines, indicate arsenic poisoning. Specifically in combination with the hyperkeratosis, the papules I saw on his skin that at first looked like scratches, but when I looked closer, they were just little bumps.
So in your opinion, is that what he died of?
It could very well be. An undiagnosed bloodborne infection doesn't manifest as Mees lines, and he had no fever. And
no TB.
And no TB. And
Even
he
though
was being tested for it, and no antibiotics.
Let me just hand you this. That's the official coroner's report, and it says that he died of disseminated tuberculosis. It doesn't mention that they pulled him off life support.
Tuberculosis is disseminated throughout the blood. Given the widespread nature of the disease, it is unlikely that any head injuries would have caused or contributed to the spread of the disease into the brain. So it was in his brain. Well, this is interesting because they're saying it's throughout his bloodstream. But there was, this doesn't make any sense. Toxicological testing was not necessary. Well, that would have shown what the Mees lines was showing.
So you disagree with the coroner's report?
Oh, absolutely.
Any final thoughts about any of this?
Postmortem cultures confirmed an antemortem diagnosis of TB. We got a lot of TB in medicine, and we knew when there was a TB in the room, whether or not it was active or passive, because there is several different types of TB. There's no way that if they suspected this, but they did, right, because it was a bloodborne infection.
Could you turn to the front to the picture of William and just hold that up? And that's the man you treated?
Yeah, that is definitely the man I treated. That bandana was even in the room.
Thanks, Eric.
Let me say first off that this is a court of inquiry. It's not an adversarial court. It's a nonprofit educational event. And with enormous energy and intelligence, all of us have been brought together to try to bring out some of the aspects. So if I may, I have prepared an overview statement based on my work these many past weeks. And I want to just say that as a parent and as a patriot, I'm absolutely outraged by what we're allowing to happen to our children. Humanity is judged on how you treat the weakest member of the society. Let me say that although pedophilia, which says child love, has nothing to do with the abuse of children, these children are not just kidnapped and in some cases bred by families as a cash crop. We have people in the United States of America that breed children in order to sell them. And when they are sold, they come without birth certificates, which means it's easier to kill them and have no one ask where they are. We're also importing children by the plane load. Again, children who have no documentation. It's not just child slavery or child sex abuse. It's also child torture because you have adrenalized blood. You have the whole blood drinking ceremony of the satanic world. It's also the use of children for harvesting body organs. We'll have the Falun Gong testimony tomorrow. One of the reasons that the Falun Gong are so popular is because they're so healthy. so that you can harvest their body organs and get the very best. And then you have ritual ceremonies and ritual murder, as well as incidental murder. But I know the system. I've been a spy all over the world. I have created the Marine Corps Intelligence Command. I have trained intelligence and law enforcement representatives, over 8,000 of them from across 66 countries. They are all, without exception, good people trapped in a bad system. And one of the most wonderful things that this court could achieve, now that we've had Pizzagate, for example, which opened people's mind, is we could achieve an opening of the public mind and an absolute imperative from the public to governments, including the U.S. government, which I think is the center of gravity in so many ways. I have found in my research and preparation for this court and all of the work that will follow that most organizations that end up being used to prey on children, Oxfam is a recent example, all of the United Nations organizations, the Boy Scouts of America, all of the child services agencies across the United States of America, they did not start out as organizations to prey on children, but they attract pedophiles. And ultimately, pedophiles end up rising in the ranks and controlling those organizations, so that an organization that initially started out in the service of children becomes an organization that is in fact hunting children. And one of our distinguished commissioners has written an absolutely wonderful book called Child Hunters, which I recommend to all of you as a brief on this. Now, it's not my working assumption, but the working assumption yet to be proven that the totality of the children disappearing worldwide is toward 8 million people, toward 8 million children. In the United States of America, the acknowledged number, not counting the children being bred without birth certificates, not counting the children being imported without documentation, is between 600 and 800,000 a year. Now imagine Africa and East Asia and all these other locations. I personally believe that the number we want to try to document is rising well beyond the official figures, and we have yet to learn what the actual number is. Okay? The other working assumption is, how long do these children survive within this system? What I am hearing from the witnesses that I've talked to is 2 years. It may be longer. It may be 4 years. It may be 6 years. But by and large, these children are so abused. I mean, we're talking rapes by the hour and so forth, that they reach their expiration date within 2 years. And then they're murdered with impunity, or they're ritually murdered if that's what they've been bred for. So I think we need to document this. No one else has done this before in a systematic manner. This commission is rendering a signal service by seeking to do an overall view in the public interest. This will be a massive, massive undertaking. And while the preliminary attempt is to do a 6-month to 9-month endeavor, subject to funding availability and the availability of witnesses and also prisoners, there are a number of prisoners who can be debriefed, who, when properly debriefed by specialists, can really give a deeper understanding that has not been achieved by existing law enforcement and other agencies, because they simply treat these people when they catch them, in those rare instances when they catch them, as disposable goods to be thrown into prison and forgotten about. And tomorrow we will have some expert testimony from one of our commissioners who can speak to this far, far better than I. William Binney is my counterpart. He is for NSA what I am to CIA, which is to say, he is saying, as I am saying, that we can delete 70% of our respective organizations and put the other 30% to work. But Binney is also the author of Thin Thread, which is a way of doing deep discovery in unstructured databases and the internet. And so he is prepared to actually help us do pedophilia tracking worldwide. And one of the things that the other technical commission, Stephen Arnold, is very good at is de-anonymizing the internet. This includes every image having a fingerprint, So you can take an image of a child being abused, and you can track that image through the dark web. So there are resources that we can bring to bear in support of this commission's mission. My favorite technical commission is Arno Reuser from the Netherlands, who is a master librarian. He is so good that when the Dutch intelligence community realized it didn't know enough about the world, they recruited him to create the Open Source Intelligence Center for Dutch intelligence. And as with the endeavors that I helped create in the United States, and in fact for Scotland Yard, very quickly people found out that they could get 40 to 60% of what they knew very cheaply using open sources of information. That's not what government intelligence agencies do today. They want to spend as much money as possible in the riskiest way possible on the most expensive way possible. They're not actually there to do decision support or answer questions. So I believe that Arno Reuser is capable of creating the world's first digital library on pedophilia. And this would be a multilingual library to include local dialects. And it would be a library that would then end up being what we call a magnet for walk-ins. We want to have a very professional ingestion system so that people can volunteer to provide expert witness to the thing, or they can volunteer to offer up their papers. There are a number of pedophiles now who are actually ready to turn over their diaries. All right, so I think we're actually doing something really, really huge. My final comment. The center of gravity for taking down the deep state. Pedophilia is both the induction glue. Pedophilia is how the deep state recruits and controls people. It is also the Achilles heel of the deep state. I believe that once the public realizes that the government is not protecting their children at a scale of vulnerability that we can articulate, then everything else about the government is called into question. All right? So for me, this is a truly righteous endeavor. And I will end by saying that as much good as it might do to get the British angry, for me, the center of gravity for change is the American public. Because if you can get the American public angry, we will stop supporting dictators overseas. We will close all of our military bases overseas. I am on record as a former CIA operations officer saying that our 1,000 bases overseas are not there for national defense. They're there to serve as lily pads for the smuggling of guns, gold, cash, drugs, and small children. So let me say I am proud to be in your company, and I believe that no matter what we do or do not do, it is going to make a difference. God bless you all.
We are the power behind the ITNJ. Add your voice. Sign the treaty.
The occult activities are coming up. And then after the actual ritual, we're going to give you some more of the history surrounding it. But first off, I wanted to draw your attention to the program that was given out to the spectators or the viewers. I guess an occultist would call them novices who actually watched as the priest and their supporters engaged in this ancient rite. Now, you're looking at a little demon called PJ that was on the front of the actual program. It's kind of an Hieronymus Bosch style. He's got a little broom and a dustpan, and he's sweeping something up. Now, even more shocking is the figure of a human body burning in the flames. In fact, I've shown it to people that are experts in anatomy, to actual doctors, and they say that the anatomical size is that of a baby or small child. Notice how large the cranium is in comparison to the torso, that is the ribs. Understand, ladies and gentlemen, this is from the program itself given out to the establishment lackeys witnessing these sinister activities. Remember, in Babylon and Tyre, they would throw their children into fiery pits. Look at the size of the hands compared to the rest of the body. Only children show these anatomical details. Now, of course, it's been airbrushed in, but it shows the psychology of those conducting these criminal activities. Now, this is the only skull we actually caught on tape. We've blown it up for you over one of the major meeting houses. Of course, it's not a real skull. It was extremely oversized up on the signage. The point we're trying to make here is the entire compound was literally infested with symbols of death, skulls, owls, you name it. At long last, here it is, the cremation of care unveiled. As we sat there in the darkness, not knowing what we were about to see in the gathering crowd, suddenly, across the small lake, we saw a carriage with men in black and brown cloaks, robes, in front and in back, bearing a bound body. Now, we're about to show you the raw footage. You can see the torches coming out of the woods on the other side of the lake. We're going to show you the whole ceremony without video enhancement. Later, we're going to blow it up for you. Remember, it was a hidden camera and at somewhat of an angle. Something particularly pleasing was happening for the Bohemian Grovers with whatever developed with that crowd of men in black and brown and the bound body on the back of the buggy. They drove behind big black tarps they had hanging out of the trees. There was lots of smacking on lips of in bizarre enjoyment by the crowd. We still haven't made out exactly what was going on, but that a real sacrifice may have
intensely for 10 years. And then my abuse continued in a different form for maybe up to about 12, 13. So, yeah, I am a survivor.
If someone from the outside was to, or one of your neighbours was to look on and see Jeanette and her family, what would they see to the outside world?
Well, we lived in southwest London and we lived in a council property area, you know, like a little council estate. So what they would see is what would have been typical of a family in the 60s, 70s and 80s that was from that area living in that way. So no different or no, you know, wouldn't have stood out from any other families.
So there was nothing like, you know, things daubed all over your house and the neighbours think, oh, that lot, they're into some weird stuff.
No, we had normal neighbours. You know, my mum is an absolute master of disguise. They all are because they're trained to be that way. So no, we would have seen as the normal family, struggling to make ends meet. Kids were probably, there were 5 of us, so, you know, probably a bit scruffy and, you know, unkept.
And Jeanette has siblings, but we're not going to involve the siblings, albeit that they were victims themselves. But Jeanette's respected their views on whether they do or don't come forward. But Mum and Dad, I mean, what was Dad like?
Dad was an electrician. normal looking guy. I think he was about 5'8", black hair, blue eyes, you know, just, yep, normal looking guy. Used to go working on different building sites wherever the sparky work was. Yeah, it was normal daily life.
And Mum?
Mum was Mum, so in those days she was just home with the kids, yeah.
And so, just from the outside, it was just a normal family doing normal things.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
one of the things that we discussed was that you've got quite a good memory recall.
Yeah.
There's a lot of survivors of this sort of abuse years because of the trauma totally blacked out. But what makes it different is you know, the clarity of your recall. Now you sort of stated that this went on from almost from birth.
Yeah, as far back as I can remember, I was being sexually abused within the satanic ritual, you know, the satanic ritual abuse cult set up.
Right.
As far back as my memory will take me, and that is quite far back, you know, toddler, if not a little bit less, but a little bit younger. So yeah, my memory, I haven't always had the memories. I spent quite a few years blocking them out in every which way I could, you know, in order to just not feel the pain and stay alive. So, but when I did decide to recover my memories and recover, then yeah, it's taken me quite some time, but I've been on this journey for probably around 25 years now. So my memory recall, as you call it, is very clear and details are everywhere.
And you've done the most important thing to totally break the cycle. You know, it stopped with you, and that was that. It was
100%.
not going to go on any further. Now, there's a lot of people that think that pedophiles are just men. You know, what would your answer to that be?
Absolutely not. I mean, in satanic ritual abuse, the abusers are equal measure of men and women. So no, there's not even a difference really. It's not even dominated by males, and there's a few women. It's literally equal measure.
And in respect to cultures and classes and religions and races, were they as diverse, or was there a specific group that looked a specific way that were involved? Who were they? Who are the Satanists, as it were?
Who are the Satanists? I mean, the Satanists that I was abused by were normal families in southwest London that were united in this cult, as I call it. I don't think religion or creed or anything like that even comes into it.
Right. Now, we spoke earlier, and you were going about you've got memories from as young as 3 years old. What were they doing to you at the age of 3 years old?
So the abuse started in the home. With my father abusing me, so that's quite vivid memories of him just being very violent and aggressive towards me vaginally, and starting to, you know, use his hands in ways of abuse, and being always very filled with rage and telling me that it's all my fault. You know, I deserve this because I've been born female, and he has to do it, and all, you know. So in the home, that abuse started very early on.
So we're talking sexually abused by your father.
Yeah. There, watching. Yeah.
And did it at any point she intervene?
No, never. She actually would set it up for him to do it.
Can you explain?
Well, she'd make sure there was a room vacant. Right. You know, so if the other kids were out of the way, she would, for example, leave me in their bedroom. That was always a very common place. And my father would come in, and she'd make sure that they, you know, there was no interference, no interruptions. So she would set it up. She would often as well, within the home situation, she would call me to her and pretend to be really angry, like I'd done something wrong. It's like a little sort of ritual on its own, really. and she would hit me and physically abuse me, and then she would send me to my father. So for example, he would have a bath run ready, and then the drowning ritual would begin from there.
Yeah, this is something that crops up quite a bit.
Yeah.
Suffocation, drowning.
Suffocation and drowning.
So your mum would engineer a problem,
Yes.
which you was the cause of the problem.
Yeah.
You would then be slapped around, shouted at. Your father would run a bath.
Yeah.
And then you said the bath ritual. What can we explain that more?
So I would
Describe
then
that
be
for us.
stripped down naked. My mum would often strip me naked and then send me into him, so I was naked once I arrived into the bathroom with him, and he would pick me up, put me in the bath, make me lay down, and then this practice of putting his hand over my face and just ducking me in and out of the water like this, so it makes you feel like you're drowning.
Right.
And then after so long doing that, he would hold me under, and then somehow he always knew the moment to bring me back up.
Right.
And then once the bath ritual was done,
and this is just a total sort of mind control,
Yeah,
and this is
yeah.
above bullying,
Yeah, because I think the thing that my mum would do by being aggressive and angry, it was all mind control, because it's feeding you the information that it's your fault.
Yep.
So it's breaking you down right from the get-go. Right from the get-go, when my father was sexually abusing me, I may not have even been out of nappies.
Yep.
But always it comes with that rage and that brainwashing of this is your fault.
Yeah.
So it just breaks you down. It breaks a child down to never be able to defend themselves.
Jeanette, 2 days ago, a good friend of mine committed suicide. A few years before that, a father committed suicide, and there was a lot of abuse going on in the home. And suicides are a huge problem. So is alcoholism, so is drug addiction, violence in the family, and total dysfunctionality. So much of this has got its root in abuse.
100%, yeah.
People need to understand.
Yeah.
Now, we were discussing you as a child. So at some point, you've got to be released into society. You've got to attend school, because that's going to make even more alarm bells. So how comes a teacher never picked up on this? How
Well,
would you present yourself in school?
I've asked myself this so many times, because I feel I went through a stage of feeling really angry with society, teachers, doctors, whatever, that no one actually looked at me and went, what is wrong with that child,
So how would you present yourself as a child?
I would be now looking back as an intellectual adult that would see what other people would see, I would have presented as a seriously traumatized child, like terrified child. I would just cower in corners in playgrounds and classrooms, and I would have also been very underweight and malnourished, never had appropriate winter clothes. I was always cold and very thin, and baths and hair washes and things like that weren't really a thing, maybe once a week, or you share the bath water with your siblings.
I know that from when I was investigating it. There was one girl, and I said to her, what would you like at school? And she actually described yourself, Now, I then, years later, maybe 20 years later, I went and tracked down her teacher.
Wow.
And I said, and he actually did. He said, I think there was something wrong, and he burst into tears, and he said, I could have saved her. I said, well, I don't think you could have done, but she always remembered you as a nice guy. She said, if I was ever going to talk to her, it was going to be this guy. His name was Trevor. So Trevor, she said you was the only one but she was too frightened. So there are people out there that work in schools. There are people that engage with children. They must have kids like this present themselves all the time.
I think nowadays it would be flagged up far more than it did when I was at school. I'd like to think that, because when a child is so glaringly something so obviously wrong, we do have different things in place now, don't we, with child protection, but safeguarding and everything, but there was nothing like that.
And we're going to move the timeline on in a second, but what I want to say is that we get a lot of people here that criticise the police for stepping in and taking children into protective custody. They criticise the social services for stepping in and stealing children, as it's called. But so can we have a balance here and see that sometimes children are taken into care because their parents are like Jeanette's parents, and they've been rumbled, right? So there is a need. 80% of all child abuse goes on within the home environment or those with parental responsibility for the children. Let's not get this wrong. You know, there was this thing about stranger danger that came out, and even Jimmy Savile wrote a book on stranger danger. You know, stranger danger is such a small percentage of the risk to children. Most of the risk is in the home, so let's get that right. So from the age of 3 years old, there's something you said to me earlier that you started to be sold.
Yeah, so it was
What does that mean?
standard when a child turned 3 within the family and the SRA cult, you were sold. So I was sold at the age of 3. That meant that then you would start to be taken out of the home and sold to into paedophilia, and used then for rituals in houses or lots of different venues. And that was when my parents would then start making their money from me.
Right. Right, let's start off with rituals. You mentioned rituals. What does a ritual mean? What did you remember about a ritual?
Rituals, I mean, I'm going to generalise because obviously they can come in varied shapes and sizes. But so, for example, I would be taken to a house, generally local within the sort of area, and it would be obviously all pre-arranged. There would be lots of people there, lots of men and women all standing around drinking and chatting as if it was a social, and my father would start to go around and collect everyone's money. They would all be passing him the money.
Was you the only child there?
Quite often, yes. Or the other thing that could happen is there would be other children in different rooms, depending on the location. And also another regular thing is all the children would be gathered up in one room, like maybe 4 or 5 kids, and we'd all be lined up. And then you'd be picked out of the lineup for whoever wants you. But in the situations where it was just myself, then my dad would start collecting the money, and my mum would take me into what was the ritual room and strip me naked and leave me there. So then what would happen is all the people would come in, and the satanic abusers, they would form a huge big circle around me, and various things would happen. But again, for example, there would be a cup passed round that they would sip from.
Right. Do you remember what was in it?
Yeah, blood.
From where?
I don't know where they would have got that cup full of blood from at the time.
Right, okay.
But I know how they got blood, but in that moment, I don't know where they'd have gone and filled that up.
We're going to cover that, aren't we?
So then they would start to, there would always be someone that was leading the way. So there would always be a person dressed in like a robe set up,
Can you describe
robes.
the colour or?
So the colours that I used to see a lot were red and white robes, and it did vary. But I would say a prominent robe would be red and white. So he would, or she, whoever was wearing the robes, would be in charge, and then they would start to chant and sort of sway from side to side. Quite often now, all these people in the circle were naked as well.
Right.
So they'd all stripped off. And then once the person in the robes sort of signalled, they would take it in turns to come to me and sexually abuse me in whatever manner they chose.
So this could be men or it could be women?
Yeah, men and women. And they would then, when they were finished, they would go back into the circle and the next person would come through, and it would go round in a sort of anti-clockwise order.
Was it always anti-clockwise, was it?
Yes, yeah. It was always
right.
Anti-clockwise, yeah.
We'll recap on this because Jeanette, from the age of 3, she's been abused at home, sexually abused, and also violently abused, and there was drowning. So this is a torture, and this is a mind control element that does crop up quite a bit, and I've heard this quite a lot. From then, at the age of 3, They then deemed it ready that they could then start profiteering out of Jeanette, and she was taken to rituals, also taken to paedophile groups for the purpose of paedophilia, but also to satanic rituals. So when we see these Satanists speaking out, they attack me all the time. All the time they attack me. So look who's behind these people, okay? And look at the RAINS list. Look at the names on the RAINS list. The names that are in popular life and in politics that are on the RAINS list. And this is what they do, okay? This is not pagan worship. This is not white witchcraft, the love of the birch tree or the oak or the apple or whatever it is. This is what they do, okay? Look at the RAINS list. Jeanette, 3 years old, is taken there by her mother and her father. Now again, look at the betrayal of trust. And one of the things you tend to see is the parents taking them, but the mother tends to come and get them, and that is the you're being saved by the ones that abuse you. That's a popular thing, and I think you'll allude to that shortly. Again, that is another mind control element to this. Stripped naked, and then these are grown people, adults, men and women. So let's dispel this myth that child abuse is just perpetrated and orchestrated by men. Absolute nonsense. Again, this is organised. They would strip naked. There will be chanting, swaying, the drinking of blood. And little Jeanette, the little naked 3-year-old, is placed in there while each member, men and women, took turns to do appalling things to this girl. And this would go on whilst they still chanted and swayed. And I mean, obviously, you know, a 3-year-old's body, you know, is not designed for that sort of abuse. So this would have left you with, I would have thought, injuries.
Oh God, yeah. So, I mean, those sorts of rituals would end up with, when it was all over, I would obviously be a very broken child, little body on the floor, covered, just saturated in body fluid. You know, whatever they wanted to do.
We know what body fluid that is, yeah.
In whatever form,
yeah.
You know. So then my mum would come back in. Once they'd all left, my dad, would always hear my dad making sure everyone had paid him. And I'd just be in a crumpled little thing on the floor, and my mum would come in with a towel and sort of mop me up, get me dressed.
That's kind of her.
She didn't even really do that.
And bear in mind what Jeanette said, that she was an undernourished 3-year-old, so she would have been underweight and under height, you know. And she said sometimes there were other children. But then, we've had a long time to discuss this, but there's something you mentioned to me, and I want to take us to this place, if we may. And it's, again, you can see the farm. Are you all right to go ahead? Please listen to what Jeanette's got to say, and you can see what this is doing. What was the farm, Jeanette?
The farm was a place where satanic ritual abuse happened week in and week out. It was where children and babies were raped, tortured, murdered, sacrificed, buried. Children were abducted and brought there in vanfuls. Children were held captive in underground tunnels. There were a number of barns. One of the barns was where I would be held captive. I was used for rituals a lot. So I would be shackled in this barn before being led out. Rituals there were, I think, the extreme ritual process of satanic ritual abuse. The houses, not mock-ups, probably a bit of, not the best phrase to use, but they weren't as intense with how detailed they went into. So in the farm rituals, for example, I would be held captive in a barn probably for a day or even 2 days.
Can you just describe the barn? A barn is an outbuilding of a farm.
So this
size-wise,
this particular barn was, I'm not very good with size-wise, I would say 15 foot long,
right,
but open fronted.
Right.
So the front was open.
Yeah.
Other barns weren't, but this one was. So I would be held captive there before ritual, and I would be starved. They had what was called a cleansing process, so tubes would be stuck down my throat and fluids pushed through. I would have tubes stuck up, through my bottom and flushed out. So it's like a cleansing ritual. And then I was put in the white gowns before being led out for the rituals. Next to that barn, there was like a little smaller outbuilding, and in there was what we used to call the electric chair, and that was a place of torture. So if you were put in that chair, you were given electric shocks.
Did that happen to you?
Yeah. Every form of torture, like the electric chair, was to tell you that you must never ever speak out.
Yeah.
It was part of that.
Yeah.
In that open fronted barn, I had the end where all my chains were, but then a bit further down there was a little doorway in the floor that lifted up, and the grandfather, my father's father, who ran the farm.
So this is intergenerational with your...
Yes.
So your grandfather had sort of governance of this farm.
He was top dog on the farm, yeah.
He was top dog. The part of the UK, are we talking the Midlands, the South?
We're talking Surrey.
Surrey. And it's quite ironic because Surrey crops up in Audrey Harper's book. Carolyn Bramall also says that Surrey is an epicentre. And it's a wealthy area. They call it the stockbroker belt. And it's a very, very wealthy county. So you get taken to this farm which has got numerous outbuildings. Your grandfather, who's a Satanist as well as your father. So therefore your father would have enjoyed this, I would have thought, as a child.
I expect so.
Yeah. And then you are chained up, you are stripped, you are then flushed out with pipes. And I wouldn't have thought there'd be any anaesthetic when they did that.
Oh no.
It was done with it. And both front and both back, and then placed in white gowns. And then we're talking about an electric chair where obviously you're put in there and voltage is passed through there. Yeah. Can we go on to?
So the underground, the little box was also the grandfather's torture tools. So there was lots of things in there that he would use.
Like what do you remember?
There were things that were used like hot pokers. That were put inside me. Lots of things for suffocation, like different types.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah, masks and.
Vicky Ash goes on about hot pokers inside the back passage and things like that.
Front was for me more so.
And again, can you imagine? Well, I'm saying it to them, people out there, Jeanette, the injuries. If you burn yourself, scald yourself on a cooker or something, can you imagine deliberately having something placed into your anus or into your vagina? Can you please try and imagine? Right, and there'll be no anaesthetic, no one's coming to administer a painkiller to a poor little child.
I think the best thing was if I passed out, then I wouldn't feel it, So, but I remember the intense pain leading up to being able to pass out. So that was that barn, and then there was another barn that had meat hooks lined up in there, and children were put on the meat hooks.
Can you describe to us how they were put on there?
Literally picked up and put on in the back.
On their back?
Yeah, so the hook would go in the back. They would be alive.
How old were these children, do you recall?
They were all about, I used to go by my size, so I would say they were all around the same sort of age, I mean, if I was on the farm from around 3 to 9 or 10 years old, so anything really in that age range.
What was the purpose of placing a frightened, in pain child on meat hooks? What would they get out of that?
they had probably been, these would probably have been abducted children, and they would have been used for rituals, and this was one of the ways they killed them.
Right.
And then so what they would do is the likes of us children like myself within the family of this would have to sit in that barn whilst this was happening, and then again being told this is what will happen to you, you know. So there was so much of this.
When that was going on, what were the adults doing?
What do you mean? What?
How was this ceremony run? Who was
This
putting them
wasn't
on
really
there?
a ceremony. This was more the grandfather clearing up. This
Right.
was like kids. The ceremonies would have been done.
Would that kill the child?
The meat hook?
Yeah.
No, but what they would have done was he put them on the meat hook, and pretty much instantly he would slash them from there to there and open them up.
So that entire body cavity would be opened up.
Yes.
What
and
would
then
happen to their organs?
He would use his hands
Yeah.
to pull it out, and it would all go into a bucket below.
And the purpose of that? Did you ever find out?
What another thing that I used to have to endure once I was taken to the meat hooks was he would make me eat out of the bucket.
What would you eat?
The innards. Whatever.
And if you didn't eat?
Oh, yeah, I mean, that was punishable. He would make me eat until I vomited.
Well, no wonder you're a vegetarian, Jeanette. I mean, you got, you know.
Yeah, I don't do rotting flesh anymore.
No.
Yeah, not voluntarily.
Okay, right. So we've had, you know, this. You were saying there were other barns and they were used for different purposes.
Yeah. So
what
that
else
was
can you recall?
The meat hook barn, and then there was what we'd sort of see as the fancy barn. So this was bigger. It was 2 levels. There was always straw, like hay bales in there. Now this barn was where what we used to call the important people when they used to come to the farm.
What does that mean?
That means the people that my grandfather used to answer to, because apart from the important people, my grandfather was top dog. No one would dare say boo to him. Everyone was his lackey. They did everything he said.
Can you just describe your grandfather so we get an idea of what he looked like? And there was something you said about him that was quite poignant.
That he was, I don't know what I've said to you, but he...
His eyes.
Oh, God. I mean, yeah, he was like a walking dead person. I mean, he didn't have nothing. There was nothing in his eyes. And, you know, I can say this with such clarity because I used to look and try and find something, because when you're going through such horrific abuse by the people that are supposed to love and protect you, I used to look for something that I could almost manipulate, you know. So it's like if I saw some kind of something in there, I could use that and maybe...
It's an emotional lever.
Exactly. You know, I used to do it with my mum and my dad. But my grandfather, nothing. He was just dead eyes, empty. There was never anything there. He never flinched with every single thing I ever saw him do, from meat hooks to chopping up bodies to all the stuff. I never saw him flinch.
This might go some way to explaining why we've got world leaders that can actually take young boys into war and sleep with it and live with it, you know?
No conscience.
No conscience whatsoever. Because people say to me, how do these people sleep at night? Well, they do.
Well, isn't it called psychopathic?
Psychopathy, yeah, psychopathy.
Tendencies.
So we're going on about important people. So your grandfather being top of the tree really on a domestic level, but there is a hierarchy here.
There is.
So he is answering to everyone else. And the important people, were they men, were they women?
With the important people, they were men. So they would come to the farm in groups of 3, 4, 5, 6, in suits, always very smartly dressed, very confident, I think is the word I would use, arrogant. And they would demand that there were a handful of us kids put in the big barn, the fancy barn, waiting their arrival.
And what would happen when they turned up?
They would have their own alcohol, drugs, so they would start partying, really.
Right.
And then...
And where were you children?
In there having to watch. So
Right.
we would just sort of be, you know, cowering in the corner until they decided to drag us out and start. It would normally start with sexual abuse, sort of like orally, and making us, you know, do things to them orally, and until eventually it was, you know, we would all be raped in turn and swapped around, and, you know, take it in turns with swap from one to the other.
So this is incredibly well organised.
Exceptionally well organised, yeah.
Was there anything unique about these men? Were they of the same sort of ilk? Were they well dressed? Was it, you know, were they posh speaking? Were they common? Were they?
They were not. They were not. They didn't speak like us. Let's put it that way. Like we do. They were very posh. Very posh.
The reason I say this, Jeanette, because if we remember the testimony of Darren, he sort of says very similar, that these guys, usually 3 to 6, would take them, would beat them, and then would rape them, and they were all posh. And this is things that have come out in the government inquiries as well. And afterwards, I put Darren in touch with the solicitors for the government inquiry, and he named one of his abusers as Bishop Peter Ball, who had previous for whipping and raping boys. And he said that there was a big inquiry into Bishop Peter Ball. There was, you know. So this very ties in with what you're saying. So you've got to a stage where the kids, there's a party, there's these important people, they are posh people. The point of contact is the grandfather. The grandfather brings them to this barn where there is alcohol, there is partying, there are drugs, and then the children are dragged out. The abuse starts with oral abuse and it goes on to full rape. Does anything else happen after that?
Well, that would go on for quite some time. Their finishing thing would be they would then pick up their sticks that they would bring themselves.
What were these sticks like?
I want to say the term like cat o' nine tails, but it wasn't that. It wasn't like loads of bits, but it wasn't just one solid stick.
Right.
It would have like
strands coming.
Yeah.
Were they thick? Were they heavy sticks, or?
They were more the sort of sticks that when you were hit with them, instead of like if someone knocked you over the head with a big thick, it would knock you out. It would be a clump. This was more of a sting,
like
whipping,
a cane,
whipping type of pain. And what they would do once they'd finished the raping, and we were all just in a crumpled heap on the floor anyway, they would then pick up these things they had and whip us all until we were bleeding, and then they would leave.
I want people to try and imagine and then draw parallels. I've been doing some research into the public school, the posh school system, in which whipping and raping of young boys was commonplace. Schools such as Eton, Harrow, Winchester, Radley, there's more than one testimony. There's a lot of people who made these testimonies, and these are places that are staging posts, are training centres for future prime ministers. Who are these people? Why are they doing this, and how are they allowed to do this? And we are going to go on. Jeanette is exceptional in as much as she's got total clarity. I speak to many people that end up so heavily traumatised they have what they call DID, dissociated identity disorder, in which they will fracture their mind, and their minds will have been fractured in many places due to the drowning, due to the whipping, due to this. And trauma. And of course then they get attacked by people such as Jean de La Fontaine and many other sort of so-called government academics that bring about this false memory syndrome, where they do their best to try and smash these people when they get to court. So imagine coming forward, making testimonies, and we are going to get to the police investigation shortly without naming names or places, and how there is this reluctance to investigate. And I think there's something that will be mentioned which will probably go a long way to explaining why that happens. But just please, if you have children, try and imagine, you know, not only the pain but the fear, and this isn't just a one-off. This was Jeanette's life, time and time and time again. Jeanette, the farm, how much of that was part of your life? From what age group?
I'd say from 3 to 10.
So 7 years of this. And how often would it occur?
Oh gosh, that's a really hard one actually, but I would say, I think if I use the word regularly, it's very hard for me to get pinpoint days and how long that was, and
well, trauma does that.
Yeah, and
trauma
drugs were used, and you know, so.
And this is something that they attack victims with as well, and it's been well cited that trauma will cause a dyspraxia of like a chronology, as it were, you know.
Yeah, of course.
Now, there's something that I would like to ask you, and I think people will be asking, if they're doing this, killing these children, what are they doing to the bodies? Where do the bodies go?
Okay, so on the farm, there was, it used to be called the well.
Right.
It wasn't a well as such, it was a huge big hole in the ground, big dugout hole. The little bodies went in there. My grandfather would often pick me up and hang me over the hole, and there were just layers of bodies, dead babies in there. And then the top layer, which he used to make me get really close to, there would often be a young toddler or something in there that was still alive, but like looking up at me, so I would have eye contact. Or you'd just see sort of wriggling going on. I would know that
must have stunk
they're not
as well.
dead yet. Oh, yeah, of course it stunk. I mean, it
Where,
was...
Where were the babies coming from?
These were either, again, abducted children, or they were supplied by breeders.
I hear this a lot, breeders, I hear this term. And the range list, again, people dismissing this range list, dissing it as it were. Look at the accuracy of this range list and look at the people that are on there, right? And they go on about breeders. What is a breeder?
A breeder is somebody that they use to impregnate, and then they will hold captive through that pregnancy, and then they will induce that pregnancy, normally at around 8 months, 7 or 8 months.
How would they induce it?
So my experience of that what I had seen with my own eyes is that I didn't see inducing. I saw babies being cut out of bodies, but I do have I do know another survivor of SRA that was used as a breeder, and her own mother induced her pregnancy with whatever drugs. She was given
there
a
is a drug.
concoction
There is
of something, and it was induced. So I don't know technically how they do that.
If anyone, I always mention about this book, it's called Dances with the Devil by Audrey Harper, and she's actually gone to the police and she's told the police everything, and she was involved in satanic rituals, and she goes to say about the breeders exactly what you said. And this again is well documented, you know, and she used to say sometimes the best thing for these children was to be killed, because their lives, they were already given up to that. You know, we have to ask ourselves, what is the point of all this? What did they gain out of this?
I don't think anybody with a healthy mind can ever answer that question.
No.
How could I ever answer that question? What I would say, what I saw was just the power trip and the control, and
what was the demeanour of the people who are doing it? Do they seem that they're uncomfortable doing it?
There was a mix of that actually. So you would have the likes of my grandfather, completely nothing, and then, you know, I did witness people on the farm that I could see they were really terrified. I mean, adults, you know, really terrified and really sort of like scurrying around and making sure they were doing all the right thing, and you could see that they didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, that they, could I go as far to say they're victims too? I don't know, but that's me being generous.
Everyone has a choice.
Yeah,
and it's
they do.
like Corinne Hutzenbach says, you know, they may blame duress because of this cult that they're in, this secret society, but at the end of the day, they have a choice.
Yeah, you do.
And they chose to do it. And she said they do this because they enjoy it. They enjoy it. Were there people that clearly enjoyed doing what they were doing?
100%, yeah.
Men and women.
Men and women, and they would be the people that would take part in the rituals. The people that were more sort of fearful and scurrying around, the sort of lackeys, they were the ones that got the leftovers.
Did they ever make a mention of a deity or anything like that? Or?
Well, Satan, that word's thrown around all day long. Personally, I think Satan is just who they are. It lives within them. I think that's their own darkness.
I think that is the essence of Satanism, that they are God and they can do what they want. And they obviously do.
It's just an excuse.
I mean, the question has to be asked, how the hell, well, it's the wrong term, but how did they get away with it? Now, we're going to jump the timeline, but there is a reason for this. If you want to know what happened, Jeanette actually reported this on 2 occasions to the police. I've seen the investigating officers' names, and I can vouch for one of them because one of them is a good friend of mine, and I know was a hard-working detective and on this unit. So it did go to both the Metropolitan Police and to the Surrey Police, and you actually attended this farm, and you instructed the police where to dig.
Yeah.
What did they do?
Well, it was going really well, and then I had, because there was 2 police things involved, and yeah, so the Met and Surrey Police were involved. Yeah, so it was all going really well. This investigation was going on for 18 months. I mean, when I say I bared my soul and then some. You know, I gave them every single thing I possibly could. I took them everywhere, houses, farm, you know, everywhere. So it was going really well, and then I'd taken them to the farm and showed them where the well was, and you know that there were bodies in the woods, and you know.
And if they dug,
everywhere.
They would have found
100%. So
and they never.
They never. So they came to my house and said, "Look, you know, this is what's going to happen." They used the sort of term "going live." We're going to be going live. Is that what they say, or something like that? You know, as in it's going to kick off basically. Yeah. They've got protection in place for me and all this stuff. And then a few days later, I had a couple of people come back quite high up and said, "We're closing it down." Boom, done.
Any explanation?
Well, one of the explanations was that because I told them that my grandfather drove the van, which, you know, had the children in the back, they said, sorry, that couldn't have been true because he didn't have a driving licence and he rode a bicycle.
Now, if we look at the interview I did with James Reeves came forward and said that Ted Heath would attend Hampstead Heath and the Spaniards Inn and Jack Straw Castles in his car, and he was driving. They dismissed his evidence that he was picking up boys based on purely that. It was later proved that Ted Heath never had a licence and would drive. I mean, they were just looking for...
Why would they think he'd care?
What would it matter? You know? This man is killing babies, raping children, organising atrocities that are beyond comprehension, and the fact that he didn't abide by the provisions of the Road Traffic Act, it's just absolutely unbelievable.
So yeah,
but we'll get to that at some point. You know, with the police involvement on there. But so at about 7 years old, the farm wasn't the only venue. We went on earlier on prior to this, and you was mentioning about a flat you went to, and it was your grandfather's flat. Can we talk about that? Because this was a place of child pornography.
So that was set up for torture, and
where in the world was this?
So this was back now in southwest London.
Okay, right.
His flat was set up. There was 2 different areas, so it could be 2 children in one time. But there was always photos being taken and video being used. So that was set up on proper.
What were
filming.
they taking photos or video of?
Me being abused, and tortured, suffocated, burnt, again, hot iron, pokers.
So these are
everything.
torture videos as well?
They were torture videos every time. This wasn't just I say just but this wasn't, you'd go there, be raped and filmed. This, you'd be tortured. I would be tortured every single time.
So it was being filmed. Aside from the people that were doing it, were there anyone else ever present?
Yeah, so there would always be a handful of other men and women that would come in.
Men and women?
Men and women. My mother would always be there, sort of stroking my head, saying, there, never mind, mum is here. So a lot of that went on. But over the road from this flat were police flats, so police would come into that situation and watch.
So there was police accommodation building
in
southwest London, and the officers that live in there, how do you know they were police?
Because they would have their uniforms on.
What would they do?
They would stand and watch the torture being filmed.
But they just watching, or?
No, they'd be masturbating. There were also times in that same police flats over there where we'd be taken into those police flats and be given to them. So they were involved, yeah.
I don't want to make this at all about me, but I want to say this because it bolsters up what you're saying. There was information given about a police accommodation block, not in southwest London, but in southeast London, and it was corroborated, and it was boys were taken in there, and there was allegations that child porn was made in there. Okay. It's open knowledge what I did when I spoke out, and the attack that came on me. So doesn't this go a long way to explain why there has to have an attack on me, and there has to have a discontinuation of your testimony?
Yeah. Because also the farm, can I just say here, is Crown Estate. Belongs to the Crown.
Crown Estate. And the investigating team were well aware of this?
Yeah.
You know, we are seeing this failing time and time again when we have people like Leon Britton as a Home Secretary who had the overarching governance for the police and the investigations, and he was named time and time and time and time again. Him and many other handful of select MPs. Some we can mention, some we can't. You know, how dare they? Do you know, British public, you've got to wake up. You have to wake up. There's a little feather landed there. You've got to wake up to what is going on here. All right, and please continue. So we had this. I'm going to recap. We've done from 3 years old the abuse that poor Jeanette endured. And then we go on, it's not just a father, grandfather seems to be sort of like the grand wizard or whatever you call him, the grand slug in all this. Then has this property that he runs, this farm down in Surrey. Okay, again, Surrey is mentioned many, many times, and that has been corroborated. In this farm is a collection of barns where different abuse and rituals, satanic rituals and abuse involving just rape and torture of children go on. Okay, Steve, we will discuss that later. Please get in touch with us afterwards, and then from there is this elite sort of barn where the important people go, men, posh men that would party, drink, take drugs, and then engage in the rape of children. This isn't an orgy, this is rape and this is torture of children. They would then whip and beat them. Not only that, children were hung on butcher's hooks. They were then garroted. Their gizzards were cut open. Jeanette was made to eat that. There was a pit where children and babies were thrown into, and some of them were alive, and Jeanette was made to sort of go down and held over it. Okay, so, and then the granddad will also have his flat in southwest London, where she'll be taken for the purpose of rape and torture videos of this young infant child, junior child, school case, little infant age child. And what has sort of made my legs wobble is that this was near to a police accommodation building, which was what is termed as a section house. The police are aware of this. Jeanette has made disclosures, and again there has been a discontinuance for the most bullshit reason. Okay, that police officers not only would attend to watch these rape and torture child porn videos, they would watch and attend and masturbate. Some of them were in uniform or half uniform, as really was the case. A lot of cops would travel about in what they call half blues. But Jeanette was also taken into this accommodation building for the same purpose. And this has been corroborated by another police section house, which has been named at the independent inquiry. And again, anyone who speaks about this is attacked, and I've been attacked. Poor Camilla Batman-Gellage, who had Kids Company, spoke out and was attacked. Maggie Oliver was attacked. Lenny Harper was attacked. We are not liars. We are decent public servants. We are not liars, and we are attacked. So if we're attacked as coppers and discredited by these disgusting chief constables, these vile chief constables that we've got, commissioners, they're the ones behind this. Okay, then what hope does someone like Jeanette? Now Jeanette, as you can see, is incredibly articulate and has got high IQ and has got compassion and drive. What about those that weren't fortunate enough, that ended up engaging in a life of criminality, dysfunctionality, drugs, alcohol, depression, and everything else? And they are so easy to discredit, so easy to discredit. That's taken us really up until your sort of infant years, and you've not even gone into the juniors, as it were. But there was two people, and it was Doreen and her husband.
Her affair. Her husband, I think they were having an affair.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they had a flat. This lady and a partner or whatever it is. What was it about
Let's
this flat?
name them. Doreen and Brian.
Doreen and Brian. Okay, we're not going any further than that. But I slipped up with the Doreen and Brian. May you rot in hell.
Because I'd like, if there's anyone out there that knows this, to come forward.
Of course,
because,
yeah. So they had this flat.
Yeah. So they would come to my house in where we lived, and my mum would get me ready, and they'd take me away.
What would that mean, get you ready?
Well, make sure I'm dressed, shoes on, and ready to get out the door. So just basically make sure I'm there waiting for them. So they would come and collect me. They would put me in their car and drive me to wherever their flat was in London. Wasn't too long a drive, so I'm not sure where it was. And their flat was set up for torture, and I would be taken there, and yeah, that was pretty brutal. That was.
Can for the people out there, can you say it was set up for torture? They might not have a clue. Would you be able to allude and go into a bit more detail as to what that means?
Okay, so what that means is that I would be chained up, shackled. I would have various things put over my face for suffocation. I would have clamps put on my body, on my chest or on my vagina, or lots of things that hurt. They would leave me in the corner with a bucket. I wasn't allowed to use the toilet, so if I needed the loo, I had to go in the bucket. And I would be there for long periods of time, because they would sleep and they'd wake up and then they'd eat and then it'd start all over again. When I was unchained, I would be put onto their bed, and Doreen used to suffocate me, like push down on my throat, whilst he would be raping me.
How old was you, Jeanette?
Again, this would have been this was regular again, so this would have been between the years of, I'd say actually maybe between 5 and 9. Yeah.
When they were doing this, was there any sort of maternal compassion from Doreen at all?
No. In fact, she was probably worse. She was worse. She was evil, and she used to instruct him. So it's like he was the, it's like this dominant thing going on.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. He never, you know,
he didn't
it's not like he
protest.
did exactly.
Yeah.
It's not like he didn't want to do it. But she would be instructing every step of the way of where to. She was an absolute expert in child torture.
Did she have her own children?
I don't know.
There's a lady. All I will say is her name is Jenny. She's been through very, very similar to yourself, and she would say the same. It was they were foster parents that were doing it to her, and it was the wife that was instructing the man. This couple went on to win national awards for their services to ethnic and disabled children in care, and they were doing the same. So to the outside world, you know, these are beautiful people that are benevolent to children, and who knows what happens when that door is shut. Now, someone's put a thing, they put adrenochrome, I think you mean adrenochrome. Now let's talk about this. Adrenochrome is a key word that's bandied about, this chemical that comes from the adrenal glands of frightened and tortured children. Every child that went through and endured what Jeanette has, and even Jeanette herself would have excreted this thing, and then it will come out in the blood, and maybe that's why they drink the blood from the you know. So look, people going about what's happening to America, these kids in tunnels. This farm had tunnels.
Yeah, had underground tunnels.
So we haven't got to look to America. We can distance ourselves because it's America. This is going on here in our home counties, in our villages, in every little leafy avenue. Before we move away from the farm, if we may, can you just tell us a little bit about these tunnels? I know we've jumped a little bit, but it's just come to mind.
No, the tunnels were, they had two that I remember very clearly. It might have been three, but separate, like I called them cells down there. So they were.
How would you access it?
Okay, so there was a lift-up door, and then there would be steps down.
Right, okay.
So I would be taken down there, generally post-ritual, and just put in one of the cells, door locked up and left there.
Right.
It was always very cold and very damp down there, and then quite often, you know, I would be. When I was in the underground tunnel cells, I would have already been tortured and abused and everything, so I would have been in a lot of pain. So it was kind of my place where I'd just curl up in a ball and pray that no one would come and get me for a long time, you know.
Was you alone down there?
No, I wasn't. There were other children down there. Do you know what? There's something I'd really like to mention here, because I want to pay tribute to this little boy, and
I was going to mention that actually.
Yeah, so this little boy, his name was Ben, and ever since I met Ben, I've always wondered about how his parents may have never ever known what happened to him, and he had been abducted and brought to the farm, and he was chucked in the barn where I was tied up, like shackled, and he was chucked next to me and terrified. So he was smaller than me, so I cuddled him, and then before long I'd been taken out and used in a ritual, you know, abused, and then I was put in the underground tunnel, and then what happened, however long later, I don't know, Ben was brought down into the tunnels and chucked in the same cell as me. And I knew at that point that his life now had just been completely demolished. He wasn't the child that they'd brought in, you know. And I was in so much pain, but I never forget him, because I moved my body as much as I could, and I cuddled him again, and I just held him, and we just had the energy to look at each other and just have eye contact. And then time must have passed because I must have dozed off, and I remember waking up, coming round, and feeling freezing, like, but colder than normal. And what I then realised was it was because Ben had died and was cold, and I was holding his cold,
body. Yeah. Broken, cold body.
Yeah.
How old was Ben?
Ben was, I'd say, 3 years old at the most. He was very little.
Can we remember what sort of year this was? How old was you?
So I would have been about, this would probably been around 1973-ish.
Wow.
He was beautiful. He was blonde, blue-eyed. He was chubby.
Well, this is what they want.
Yeah. You know, he was so different. I knew when abductees came in because they looked different to us.
Right.
They were normal, healthy children. We looked like crap.
But, well,
you know.
Let's put this out. Listen, you know, we have to, and this is wrong, that we have to tread lightly because we're going to offend someone or name someone. These are people that are killing and murdering children. Okay, this isn't a mental rant at all, right? There is a young kid called Ben that went missing circa 1973 in the Surrey area, a little blonde head. Someone out there would have known him. Someone out there would have missed him. There will be a missing persons. Maybe this file's never been shut. Now it's time to put this little kid to rest and to shut this case. And it's time that the Metropolitan Police and the Surrey Police, or whatever, the National Crime Agency, whoever now has governance for this is time for the Home Secretary to get onto this. There are people out there, right, that live in Surrey. You have MPs, you have MEPs. You need to write to your MP now, and you need to get the Home Secretary to get back onto this. This farm needs excavating now. I want a campaign of letter writing to go ahead now, right, in the name of this little poor soul Ben. I want all of us to write to our MPs in the name of Ben, to write to the Home Secretary that this investigation is reopened now. So stop sitting there and watching these videos and getting entertainment out of this, because this will continue unless we stop it and we put an end to this now. They are our servants, the Metropolitan Police, under the guidance of Cressida Dick and whoever moron is running Surrey Police now. They need to earn their stripes and their pips and their ribbons and whatever else they wear around them, and they need to serve the public like they are paid to do and get this farm excavated now. Okay? This video needs to be sent to the Metropolitan Police. This video needs to be put on YouTube. This video needs to go to Surrey Police, to the National Crime Agency, to your MPs and to the Home Secretary. Burn it to a disc, put it on YouTube, do whatever you want. This needs to go out there now. There is no point doing these videos. I'm not like these other podcasters who sit there and do these videos so they can sit there and listen to gangsters saying, I shot him, I stabbed him, I did this. Sod all that. There is a purpose behind this. This is a witness project for poor souls, brave people like Jeanette to come forward, to get others to come forward to put an end to this horrific genocide of our children. All right? This needs now to go to these so-called public servants and to do something about it. All right? And I will be disappointed to everyone who watches my videos and sits there and go, John Wedge is a good guy, if you do nothing about this. I am absolutely riled. Right. Sorry.
Don't say sorry.
Can I have a cup of tea? Is that all right?
It's nice to have someone fighting my corner.
Oh, man, I'll fight your corner.
I've carried this burden for all these years.
You know, this has to stop, Jeanette. This has to stop. This is why we do this.
Do you know what? There's so many Bens. There were so many. My own sister was ripped out of my arms and murdered in front of me. And she's buried in the woods that surround it, you know. Ben's down that hole with all the others, you know.
what is the point of us continuing if nothing is done? They say to me, Jeanette, what can we do, John? What can we do? There are clever, intelligent people out there. There are civil servants out there. There are people that watch us who've got families in the police. That, you know, what is a point in you doing your job if you go home and you put your back to this? What is a point of any of you? What are the point of you church leaders? Are there people out there that are part of a church? Well, give this to your bishop and see what he does, providing it's not Bishop Ball. Give this to them. What about the House of Lords? What are the House of Lords doing? There's a Lord Bernard Hogan Howe. What are you doing about this, Lord Bernard? Right, who's the other one that was Lord Blair that was in charge of the Met Police? What are you doing about this? Lord George Carey, instead of protecting paedophiles like Peter Ball, you do something about this. If you're a spiritual leader, you do something. Because I know what God you're worshipping, mate, and it's not the same one I do. You know, we will move forward. Jeanette's not finished, and I'm not finished, and we will continue. I don't think that we need go too far now, Jeanette. But I want us just to go on that, you know, this didn't stop.
No.
You know, if I may just prompt you, from the age of 9, your father left, but your mum continued. You went with your mum.
Well, I just want to backtrack just one little bit, because what I do want to, I think is important that people know as well, is that another venue was a morgue.
Yes.
A mortuary in a local hospital in southwest London.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
So my grandfather, the 2 men that run this morgue would allow my grandfather access. Bodies were used, dead bodies were used. In the rituals that were held in the morgue, bodies were, I assume, freshly dead, would be what they would call bled. So they would be cut on the neck and on the ankles, and the blood would come out, and all the children would be sat round. They would bring children into the morgue from the hospital, because they would come in their hospital gowns. Various children were murdered within these rituals. The Satanists, my mother and father and various others, would have sex with these dead bodies, and children were raped and murdered and basically made to swim around in the blood of these dead bodies. And I think it's really important, because there's more missing children there. You know, these children were taken from the hospital.
If we look at the history of hospitals, we had Jimmy Savile, who's been proved to have been a Satanist. Jimmy Savile, who spent numerous consecutive Christmases with Margaret Thatcher, friends with Prince Charles and Prince Philip, and a procurer of children for rapes and everything else. Jimmy Savile was given the keys to the mortuary at Leeds Royal Infirmary, which it has been mentioned that he was having sex with dead bodies. I know that from my police work that if you have sex with dead bodies, there's a bacteria that is released which it's got its own unique sexually transmitted disease which only comes from dead bodies. So people are having sex with dead bodies and then passing it. These are your relatives that are dying in dignity in hospital, and these are fresh because the blood has to be exsanguinated, and therefore otherwise you leave it any longer it won't flow. So they are getting fresh bodies. This is organised. These are morticians that are linking in with Jeanette's father, then informing him, and they are taking other children, and some from the hospitals, down into this mortuary, a place of death where these bodies are sliced open, and they are then having sex with the bodies and then having sex with the children. Now, you also said that your mother had sex with the corpses as well.
Yeah.
How would that even work?
She would sit on top of one and have sex with it. How it works, God knows. But that's what, you know, what I saw.
Yeah.
In this particular one that I'm remembering is my mum on top of one dead body and my dad on top of another dead body, side by side. And there was this very distinct thing that would happen outside of the whole chanting of the ritual.
Oh, so there'd be chanting.
Oh, chanting. It was always chanting.
Right.
The distinct thing when a person, one of these Satanists, were on top of, like, having sex with a dead body, they would make this squealing sound. It was very distinct. It was almost like an animal.
Right.
It was like squealing sound, and it was awful. And that every time there was this situation, I would hear that they're making this sound.
My word. There's obviously a reason for that.
Yeah.
I mean, but what was there anything else that went on during this ritual? I mean, surely there would have been blood everywhere.
Oh, there were, in this morgue, I remember the floor was very slightly tilted.
Well, yeah,
so the blood would so the blood would run down.
Yes. There's a reason for that. Yeah.
But it was everywhere. Blood was everywhere. We would come out saturated in blood until they got the hoses out. And the children that would been murdered obviously didn't get out, and us that were coming back to the families would be hosed down.
So some kids were murdered in there.
Yes, yeah. And if we were lucky, the lucky ones, you'd be hosed down and chucked back in the back of the van and taken home.
And this is a hospital in the Surrey area and
Southwest
London. This hospital, and the mortuary assistants were involved in it. They'd be squealing, so you know, this would have been heard. This would have resonated, and again, where were the security? Where were the matrons? Where was anyone else to put an end to this? This just goes to show the complicit nature of this and how much it's linked in. But again, it's not so. I have heard it before. I have, and there's been enough in the press about this as well. So Jimmy Savile was highlighted with Jimmy Savile. You know,
what mortuaries?
Mortuaries, yeah. Sex with dead bodies and mortuaries. Oh dear.
Yeah.
So, with all of that, you also end up being pimped out by your mother.
Yeah.
Who would the clients of that be?
So when I was 9 or 10, my mum left my dad, which meant we left the farm and the grandfather.
Right.
And then what my mum continued to do was take me to. We then moved over to West London. She changed our names illegally. She moved us straight in with a man that became stepdad. We changed our name to his.
Right.
She persuaded the local school to take us without the legal papers because she wanted us to have a different name.
So how could she have persuaded the school?
Because she allowed the headmaster to abuse me. I was the payoff.
Right, so this is a primary school in West London.
West London.
You've moved in with a new bloke. Was stepdad a good man?
He wasn't as bad as I was used to.
Was he an abuser?
No, but actually what happened was my mum made that happen. So she took me into a bedroom with him and made me give him oral sex. Now he was protesting and going, like, trying to stop it. She made that happen, but he never came near me again.
Right, okay. So we got a headmaster.
Yeah.
So your mum obviously was comfortable enough to make that suggestion to the headmaster.
Totally.
So there must have been some sort of
connection.
Yeah. And the headmaster abused you. Now, what do you mean by that?
Well, he would call me into his office during school days and just make me do stuff to him, do stuff to me, just sexually abuse in general.
Whilst school was in session?
Yeah. So he'd pull me out of a classroom and take me in his office. and she took me to various pubs and sold me to men with white vans, and I'd be driven off and raped in the back of them, come back, they'd pay her, she'd bring me home.
So a grown man in pubs, white vans are presumably they're builders or whatever.
Yeah, traders.
Your traders or whatever. So he's a grown man in working class pubs that are sexually preying on this girl of 9, 10 years old. And I would assume, I don't want to feed any words, that you were still quite a slight.
Oh God, yeah, I was by this time I was very, very underweight. Very underweight. So that really all stopped around 12, 13.
Why?
Probably because I was going into puberty, and that's it, done.
Yeah, it's something that is common. It is mentioned a hell of a lot.
She did allow the step uncle, the brother of this man that we moved in with, to carry on sexually abusing me. So she would call me down from upstairs and let him take me in the front room, and she'd just shut the door. But yeah, it stopped after that.
You're 13 years old at this point, Jeanette. I mean, I don't even know where to start or finish. What has this done to little 13-year-old Jeanette's mind?
Well, I didn't have one. I was empty. There was nothing. I was a void. I was.
How was you behaving? What happened in your life?
I think what I started to realise is that I had to not ever let anyone find out. So I would just pretend and learnt to be able to pretend and hide behind whatever I could hide behind. I think I started drinking at 13, 14. I'd say by sort of 15 I was probably drink dependent. I relied on drink and drugs, not too bad on the hard drugs because I'd been given them a lot as a kid and they terrified me, the class A's. But cannabis, I couldn't go to bed without being stoned because falling asleep was terrifying to me.
Right.
You know, my father used to wait till I fall asleep and then come into my bedroom and put a pillow over my face.
Which is what Darren went on about a lot. You know, he was totally vacant all through his life because he was too frightened to sleep. So, you know, what Jeanette has said to me, and one of the conditions of giving this interview, and she has really sort of turned down an alternative to do this, and I'm so grateful doing this, was that Jeanette is coming from a position of someone who's healed and in the process of healing. She wants others to come forward. She doesn't want people to suffer in silence. She doesn't want the suicides. She doesn't want the drug addiction, the alcoholism, and this cycle to continue. And one thing Jeanette is insistent on is to really a message of hope and how you have become such a wholesome, strong and compassionate individual. How the hell have you managed this, Jeanette?
Literally blood, sweat and tears. So I think I was in denial because what happened was, and I'm going to just go bump here because I can't handle any more trauma.
No, I'm with you.
At age sort of 14, something like that, I was raped in school by a few young adults that came in from outside. Me and this other friend of mine, we were raped. After that gang rape, I hid in a cupboard. I don't know what amount of time passed, but by the time I left that cupboard, I'd shut down every single memory I had.
Right.
Boom, done, gone. Yeah. And then from 14 to like 28, I did whatever it took to never let them come up.
Right.
Never to feel it, never to remember it. I did whatever it took. So that was obviously alcohol, you know, cannabis, dysfunctional relationships, you know, you name it. At 28, I had for quite some time been planning my suicide. I lived in a flat. I was on the 8th floor, and my out, if you like, my absolute comfort was that I could jump off the balcony and it'd be over. So I sat one day and I made the decision of, okay, whatever happens, I can't carry on like this. I knew there was something wrong. I knew there was something I was hiding from myself. I knew there was something I was denying. And I actually prayed and I looked up and I said, okay, here's the deal. You show me what I'm hiding, or I'm gone. Okay? That was the option. I went to bed that night. I woke up the next day, I had my very first flashback. Boom, right in front of me. It's like someone had put a TV screen in front of my face. And I got it. I got my answer. Flashback after flashback after flashback came literally for the next 5 years.
How did you cope with that?
Well, I didn't really. I mean, I was on my knees, to say the least, piecing it all together. It was a can of worms that opened. It was like everything I knew to be my reality crashed around my feet. And I was metaphorically and also literally at times on my hands and knees, just rummaging around trying to find something that I could make sense of and piece together. What I had to realise is that I wasn't going to find it in that rubble. So I had to stand up and walk away. And then what that gave me was a completely clean slate of rebuilding. So I started to learn about who I was, as in, you know, what do I like, what do I don't like, what makes me laugh, I couldn't even see the world in colour. The world to me was in shades of grey. My brain was so shut down. So I spent a lot of years sort of doing this, and I remember a turning point one day. I was sat in my car at the traffic lights and I was like, oh my God, the traffic lights were just bright colour, because normally they're just dulcet tones. And I was like, oh, and I just had this overwhelming joy of, I can see colour. And just not a little thing, it's a big thing, but I was waking up, you know, and I was starting to, all the things they stole from me and smashed into a million pieces, self-worth, self-care, self-love, validation, you know, self-esteem, all these things that just weren't even in my reach. They weren't allowed to develop. I started to develop myself. Whatever way that took, I have had 2 incredible therapists. I've explored many holistic things that have been wonderful. I've enjoyed it. I've moved on. I've taken something from that, and it's been a complete journey of exploration. So I think what it brings me to, John, is that what I want to say is what I have now, having recovered, is what I have to give. And it's taken me to now to do this and unburden myself, because I thought doing the police investigation would free me of that burden, but in fact what it did, it made it heavier.
Oh,
it made
been
it
there,
worse.
I know.
So I need to do this, and I needed to have the courage to share my story with the world, so to speak, you know. What's important to me is that people realise the reality of satanic ritual abuse. My story, and I'm just going to say here, we have literally, this is the tip of the iceberg. The details I could give you are far beyond anything we've spoken about today. We've scratched the surface. I need people to know that this is the reality of satanic ritual abuse. And it is still happening. It didn't just happen to me. It happened to thousands of children and is still happening. That's very, very important to me. That's big part of why I'm doing what I'm doing. The other thing is many years ago when I started to heal, I had a moment, a very spiritual moment. I'm a big meditator, so I've meditated. That's really kept me in a very strong place. And I had this understanding come to me that if you view satanic ritual abuse as a tower and you have all those big important people at the top, we know how far it goes up, and then the bottom of that tower are the victims and the survivors. If every single one of those survivors could find their voice and break their silence, that you destabilise the tower.
Yes.
Now I know this because I lived in the middle of it.
Yep.
I know how they function. I know the power trips that go on. But if you destabilise it from the bottom up, you destabilise it. So I've written one book telling my story in detail and part of the healing journey, and I want to write a trilogy, and I want to share how I did it, because I believe anyone can. When I was a very small child going through this, there was always a light that I could see. I just want to say as an aside here as well, I'm not religious, but I'm very spiritual, because that is who I am ultimately, my soul. That light that I could see, I just kept walking towards it, and I knew I had to stay alive. And then what happened was I realised that light was shining from inside me, and I need to make it as bright as possible. So I've been writing for years. I've been on this recovery 25 years, since the age of 28. I'm now 53. So these books I want published, but I want the opportunity to set up safe places for survivors of satanic ritual abuse to be able to come and recover and get everything they need to do what I've done, because I know it's possible. And I know John said as well that this is the worst story he's ever heard. I believe I went through the worst story people have ever heard for this reason.
Yep.
Because if people can look at me and go, wow, well, she's done it, I can be that light. And believe me, I've never heard anyone that's been through what I've been through for that amount of time and those atrocities, and know what I know. So my plea, if you like, after doing this is there's so much more to tell you, for starters, but also help me destabilise the tower.
Yep.
Help me do it.
Yep.
You know, I do need support. I can't do this by myself. I can't, and I don't want to.
Well, I think as a community out there, because it's what we are, a community, tens of thousands of people watch this, you know, even if everyone chipped in £1 to setting up an organisation, you know, I think we'd be going a hell of a long way. And you said that, like, now what's going to happen now, Jeanette, is you are going to be a lighthouse. There are people out there in choppy waters. They are drowning.
Yeah.
They are in this storm, and
Yeah,
you will become a beacon of light in which they will come, and they will come.
And that's why I've done what I've done.
Yeah. Now, there's a guy watching here. I want to wave to him, Joseph Blair. Joseph and his brother Bobby. Their tale is so harrowing. Again, it will bring you to tears. And these people will be good for you to link in with. And there's so many others to link in with. Look, I'm not, someone said, don't tell people not to take things into their own hands. Look, I'm not on about vigilantism. What I'm on about is righteous anger and justice for children and survivors of this most appalling crime. And what are we as human beings if we allow this to continue unabated? We hold the power. Like Jeanette said,
No, sorry, can I just answer this? My
Yeah.
parents are still alive, out there.
Well, unless they... well,
Sorry,
I don't
John,
know.
carry on.
Yeah,
I
no,
just
that's
wanted
all
to
right. Well,
answer that.
they'll rot now anyway, I know. So, you know, this is in our grasp. What we can't be is divided, Jeanette.
Mm-hmm.
We can't have any division. We get a lot of trolling on there. There will be attacks coming. They'll come from the most disgusting, disturbed individuals. But I tell you what, you know, we're not even bothering you anymore. Joseph, hello. You know, the trolls, the paedophiles and the paedophile protectors will always attack, but they just expose themselves when they do. We don't worry about them anymore. But us good people, let's get together. Let's do something. Get in touch with myself. We are organising. We are actually sinking at the moment under the weight of help that we're getting. We need therapists on board. We need people to fund on board. We need fundraisers on board. We need people that know of properties. We actually need a meeting as well, and we need the victims and survivors of this most monumentally horrific crime, right, which just destroys the souls of children, to end. We need to take back these souls, and please get in touch with me. I can put you in touch with Jeanette. Jeanette has just given her testimony. She's going to be a bit raw for a while, so please be mindful of that.
I'd really also like to be able to answer people's questions, because there's a lot of questions.
There are,
and I'm okay to do that. When
I think at the moment, and I want to say something that when I do these live podcasts, if I get 120 live people, that's a very, very good hit. We have exceeded 670, nearly 700 for the last hour. Okay, that is absolutely unprecedented. We will probably be on the 50,000 views by the time I finish this. This is looking like it's going viral. Please get this, send it all around the world, send it everywhere. I want people to start writing to the Commissioner of Police. I want people to start writing to their MPs. I want the Home Secretary, right, with letters on her table by the end of this week on this, okay? So I want to just finish now. I'm just going to ask my assistant now, Christine, are there any words regarding a prayer for Ben before we finish?
Yes.
Would you like to come and please take my mic? If we can, just make some room for Christine to come through.
Can I just say, sorry, while you're setting this up, because some people are asking about the book. I haven't had it published yet, so I need help with that. I need help to get it published.
And please, before we go, please say the name of the book. All right, I'm going to just...
So the book is, the first book is going to be called There's Something We Need to Tell You. And that's me giving a voice to everybody.
Where can they buy this from?
Well, I haven't had it published
All
yet.
right,
So
well, come on.
I need help to get it published.
Let's sort this out.
I need help to fund destabilising the tower.
Yeah.
So, this is what I need help with. I need venues. I need...
If you just hold, you can hold it.
Yeah. Manpower.
Right, and just, this is a prayer for Ben, so please.
I want to prelude this with something that you said earlier about angels.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
Thank you.
Lord, we know that angels exist. We know that Jeanette experienced angels. And we pray that Ben too experienced angels. We pray that he was comforted during those final hours of his life. We know that he was comforted by Jeanette, and we pray that he had supernatural comforting too. But Lord, I'm just crying out for justice.
Yeah.
Justice for that child, justice for the parents. Bring it on, Lord, bring justice. In the mighty name of Jesus, Amen.
Amen. Thank you,
Amen.
Christine.
Please.
I hope I didn't overstep.
Please stay. I'll just you'll stay there, Christine. I'm going to finish off now. Jeanette, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And
thank you, John.
and you, Christine, you can get in on this. Right, we love you.
Thank you.
And this isn't going to stop there. God bless everyone, and please be in touch. We need you all.
I grew up Baptist. My parents were devout Baptists. That means they never went to church, but they made sure that me and my brother went every Sunday. At a certain time, when I got a little older, around 12 or 13, there was youth groups every Friday and Saturday, or every other Friday and Saturday. So, but I was going to that, and I, at one time, wanted to be a Baptist preacher, and I was totally into the God thing and thought that was the most awesome thing in the world. But, and I also describe my parents during this time. My parents were the no police. So anything I wanted to do, the answer was no. But things that I wanted to do, my parents had a good reason for saying no. Like I wanted to go see all these action movies or horror movies, and my parents said no. And then I wanted to go see the Moody Blues play. No. Anything I wanted to do, anything that I viewed as fun, the answer was no. And, I equated my parents, in a sense, to God, because God, to me, at that time, there was a time when I loved God. But then after a while, I started seeing God as He's the ruler of thou shalt nots. Everything in the Bible was thou shalt not. It wasn't a book of what you're allowed to do. It's what you're not allowed to do, which is what my parents did. This is all the stuff you're not allowed to do. And, I wanted to be religious, but it didn't seem very fruitful. It seemed like I don't get to do anything I want to do. And then, if you do something that goes against what God says to do, you get punished. Or in the Old Testament, you're killed. Well, my dad, everything I did got me in trouble. So, I'm equating both. So when I was about 10 years old, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. Well, when I was 10 years old, I had watched a lot of movies that had magic in them. And I wanted to know, is that something I can do? Is magic real? Is that like a real, viable, could I do this for the rest of my life? Could I do it one time? And there's MAGIC, and that's pulling a rabbit out of a hat, pulling a card trick, out, doing an illusion. And then, as Aleister Crowley pointed out, satanic magic should be spelled MAGICK. And that's what I wanted to do. Satanic magic. Is that real? And so I decided I would try a magic spell in real life. And I thought, okay, I get a pop quiz every Friday, but I don't want to kill my teacher. I don't want her to break her leg or something. I just want a magic spell that teaches me that this works. So I did a magic spell for money. And when I did that, I went out the next day and I found a can of tennis balls with a $5 bill in it. And I thought, this is pretty awesome. This is 1976. Candy bars are about 20 cents. Comic books are 15 to 20 cents. And penny candy is a penny. But maybe that was a coincidence. I'm going to do it again. So the next Friday, I did another magic spell for money. Saturday, I went out playing, found a $10 bill on the side of the road. And I thought, 8 days, $15? That's not bad. I can nickel and dime my way up to being a millionaire. We had spells in D&D books, in your gaming books. There was magic spells in them. I didn't know if those worked or not. Plus the library had books on magic, but I didn't want to be caught checking one out, so I would read them there, and just hope that that actually works. And then at the same time as I'm doing that, this is at 10 years old, I was in the 5th grade, and we had this game at school. I learned about it the first day of class. This kid, my age, asked me to meet him in the bathroom at the first break. Well, the first break's at 10:20. And at 10:20, I saunter into the bathroom. I don't know why I'm meeting this kid there, but there's 49 other kids in the bathroom. So now there's 50 of us, boys